Everybody wants to rule the world by shipping code faster. But in order to keep shipping fast, you need to track your customer impact and track it real good. Sleuth is combining with Sentry to give you a single solution for tracking releases, the customer impact, and making sure that errors never happen again. I'm Don, co-founder of Sleuth, and I'm joined by Rahul, Director of Product Marketing at Sentry, and together we're going to show you how you can combine Sleuth and Sentry to go fast, but safely. Don't touch that dial.
Why are we here? The main reason is code is the center of every experience. Most people talk about how it's eating the world, and quite frankly, I think it already has eaten the world. Because of this, your customer experience has to be instant, perfect, and personal. Because when your code fails, we all know this, your business fails. I just learned today that, if someone has a bad experience with your software, they're likely to tell 10 people. But if they have a good experience, they may only tell one person. So it's extremely important for us to focus on the customer experience. According to some studies, we've learned that it takes developers up to 13 hours to resolve a bug. Now, I can't tell you how much that's costing the entire industry as a whole, but that would take too many rows on an Excel spreadsheet. But we know we can fix this problem. We know there's a gap in how we monitor our software. And Sentry and Sleuth together can tell you exactly what led up to the deployment, what happened after a release, to give you the exact point in time which your application started to erode, what that specific issue was, and the tools to prevent this from ever happening again.
I'm going to show you step by step how to use Sentry and Sleuth right now. I'm going to start this demo by using an example hardware store application that's already running. We've already configured Sentry to point at this application, and now we're going to add Sleuth. So I'm going to go to Sleuth signup, and we're going to create Sleuth-demo. I guess it doesn't really matter, but demo, and that'll be our email address, demo.lost@sleuth. Sleuth demo is our username, and Sleuth is our password. And we'll sign up. Now it'll first ask what our project is. We can keep default, or let's rename it to demo, and we'll hit save. Sleuth gives us a couple different environments, production staging, that's fine, we'll confirm, and now we're going to link it to GitHub. So when we click add GitHub, it's going to go out to GitHub and authorize, which I've already done, so skip that step. And now we have ready to add a repository. So I'm going to add React down here, and it's going to create it for us. So now what Sleuth is going to go out and do is it is going to go to GitHub, and it is going to find the last few commits and register them as deploys just so we can get some starting data. So as you can see here, we had 7 deploys over the last 8 days, and Sleuth is starting to tell us some information about those deploys. We can see that the commits that were in, who did them, the actors, we can see some tags that might be useful, all sorts of nice things. But this is about the Sentry integration. So let's go and now add integration into Sentry. So I'm going to go to integrations, I'm going to go into error trackers, and I'm going to click enable on Sentry. Now I'm going to go back to Sentry so that I can get my API key. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go back into Sleuth, paste it, and I'm going to have Sleuth publish Sentry releases. So what will happen is when Sleuth detects a new release, it'll publish it to Sentry automatically. And I'm going to save that. Let's go and let's add an impact. So Sleuth can not only track your deployments, but also can track the impact for your deployments. In this case, we want to know if the Sentry error rate increases after a deployment to know if that might mean the deployment's bad. So we're going to create a new error source, and we're going to call this Sentry errors, and that all information looks okay, and we're going to add. And so now we have a new error source. So if I go back to my dashboard, you'll see the different releases, but there's no impacts. Now we're going to create a release of Sentry so that we can see, and then trigger some errors so that we can see the error impacts. If we hit refresh, we have 9 deploys over 7 days. We should see 10 deploys over 7 days, and there's our little change. Now here's what's also interesting. The impact down here, it already went to Sentry and saw the error rate, and using anomaly detection, it figured out that the error rate is normal, and so it marked the release as healthy. Now if there was errors triggered here, Sleuth would see that and mark the release as unhealthy, warning you that something might be wrong. Now Sleuth actually needs about 6 to 7 deployments to track an impact so that it can detect if it can configure its anomaly detection to know if this is a bad number or good. For example, your project might have 400 errors every day, and that's just normal for you. So you don't want Sleuth to mark that as unhealthy. Another project might never have errors, and so if you have one, you want to be notified. So we're going to have to generate a few errors so that we can have the anomaly detect when something went wrong. So now we're going to go back to our application, and this is our hardware store, and let's buy a hammer. Now when we click checkout, it's going to trigger an error. Something went wrong. And so let's actually trigger this a few times just to get a better signal. All right, so we had a bunch of errors. Now we're going to go back to Sleuth, and after a while, it'll check every minute. It'll detect that the error rate increased, and so therefore the deploy is unhealthy. All right, I finally got it. It took me a little while because, again, the model takes a little while to train, so you need to give it a bunch of data. So eventually, it got enough error results it was able to trigger. So you can see the Sentry error is determined to be unhealthy because we have 4 errors per average, whereas before, in the beginning of the testing, it was 2, so that's 100% worse. And now we can go into Sentry to figure out what's going on.
When we jump into Sentry, you can take a quick look at all the releases that have happened no matter over any period of time. And I can see the issue that you created on a release that happened a day ago. So I'm going to jump in here and see what's going on. Now, in a typical debugging environment, you're pouring through logs, you're looking at a support ticket, you're trying to recreate the issue and see what's going on. Sentry gives you all that context, so you don't have to go ask the support engineer or get in touch with the customer. You know exactly what the problem is and where it's happening. So right up top, we tell you the users that are impacted by it. We tell you all of your user agents, so what client the problem is happening on, and the operating system. And if we were to testing this on multiple operating systems and multiple browsers, you'd see all of that data populated in this facet map on the right side. Now, every developer will comb through this and be like, yeah, this is perfect. Now I know exactly what line the issue's at. I can tell what files are impacted. But my favorite part of the tool is what we call breadcrumbs. This tells you everything that your customer is doing right up until the moment that they hit that error. So when you're spending time recreating it or trying to see if it's happening elsewhere, Sentry gives you a list of breadcrumbs for you to scan quickly and jump to that part of the application that you need to investigate. Now, let's say, hey, has this issue happened anywhere else? Has it happened in previous releases? Let's take a closer look. To do that, we're going to jump into what's called Discover, our inside tools. So I'm going to open Discover, and we'll see a list of all the errors that have happened over time. But let's take a closer look. Let's zoom in on these 2 little spikes. Let's see what's going on here. We can see that we've had a successful series of releases, and this one in particular introduced this error. Now, I want to be notified if this happens again, but I also want to be notified about it when it reaches a certain threshold. So what I'm going to do is create an alert. Now, Sentry warns me like I need to create an alert based on a specific type of event. So what I'll do in my query real quick is I will add event type and then error, because that's what I want to get notified on, and run this query one more time and create this alert. So what metric alerts does is it gives you the option to create an alert, specific alert, either on an issue or a type of error or transaction. You can set it based on a aggregate count and a specific time window. So notify me if this issue happens 15 times within a 5-minute span. And in the event that you want to watch something a little bit more closely and don't want to be bothered by this, you can say, it's not that critical. Or in the event it becomes super critical, you can use one of our integrations would say PagerDuty and follow an automated escalation path. But these are some of the tools that Sentry gives you to help you filter the signal from the noise.
Well, thanks, Rahul. I know that Sentry is a tool that has not only been useful for me right now in building Sleuth, but in previous companies, we always use Sentry to track all of our errors. Now, I think we were just talking earlier, and you were saying something about Sentry is moving beyond just error tracking. Is that right?
Yeah, about a month ago, we announced performance monitoring for Python and JavaScript. So not only can you see where your software is breaking, but now you can use Sentry to trace back to poor performing API calls and slow database queries and see also the related errors. We find like Sentry is all about helping developers ship the best customer experience. And when your customers interacting with your software, a crash versus a page not loading to them is the same thing. And in order to make our developers successful, we need to tell them the whole story. So now you can track those 10-second page loads, find out what's wrong, fix it. Maybe you need to paginate all those images when you're like loading a catalog, or for some reason it's taking 2 to 3 seconds to load the shopping cart. Now you know, and your customers can check out successfully. They're happy when they use your software, and they're not lighting you up on Twitter. And now, I mean, in times like this when we're all working from home, we're all shopping online, and we're all using software, the easiest thing to do is like, come on, man, I can't check out what's going on here. We see that all too much. So we try to make sure that our developers that are using Sentry can tell the whole story and fix the problems they need to solve for.
Yeah, I've set up performance monitoring setups at like Atlassian where I used to work, and it would just take weeks to try to get the right kind of monitoring in place and recording that information and making it available for all the developers and then training them and everything. The fact that you could get something like that with Sentry without, from what I understand, it's the same setup as tracking errors. You don't have to do anything extra.
Yeah, if you're an existing Sentry customer, it's a 1-line code change in the SDK. If you're net new to our product, it's a 5-line change. So there's no agents, there's no host. It's literally a code change to your application, and instantly you start piping in transactions. Super simple.
We showed you how you can set up Sleuth today and configure the Sentry integration to not only start tracking releases, but the impact of those releases, and when errors come up, deeply diagnose those errors and prevent them from ever happening again. If you're a Sentry user today, sign up for Sleuth and start tracking your releases and the impacts of those releases. If you're a Sleuth user, sign up for Sentry to not only get better information about the impact of your releases, but to be able to diagnose the errors that you see and prevent them from happening again. Happy deployments.
Hey Don, this is Rahul from Sentry. Shit.
Awesome. All right, that'll work. Do you want any other take, or are we just happy with that?
I think that's good.